Let's go to the audience questions now, and my colleague, Vicki Yates. Vicki.
Thanks, Rory. I'm here with Professor Gil Whiting, and Professor, your question.
Okay, thank you. Welcome and good evening. Along those same lines, in Nashville, most of our low-income and minority students are in academically failing schools. Some would consider them even dropout factories. In math and English, only 2 majority high schools meet that standard. Of course, they're the majority white schools, which are Hume-Fogg and MLK. If elected mayor, along those same lines, so now you get more time to answer the education question, what would you do specifically to help the city's most vulnerable students? Remembering that a city is not measured by its greatness with bridges and edifices, but by the most vulnerable in that city.
Thank you, Professor. Megan?
I think that what you have articulated is an incredible urgency for our public education. And so you asked what we should specifically do, especially for children who are in low income and low performing areas. I've talked a lot on this campaign trail about making sure that every child has a universal pre-K seat. We know that if you are in pre-K and you go on to start kindergarten ready, your likelihood and your trajectory is going to be so much brighter. That's one component. But we also have to support our teachers and our principals to give them the resources and the tools they need. When we talk about collaboration across the different kinds of schools we have, I want to know why MLK and Hume-Fogg are doing so well and what they're doing so well, so that we can translate that across to other schools and give teachers and principals the autonomy that they need to make sure that they can serve the children in their schools. I think those are 2 examples of what I would do to make sure that we can continue to move Nashville forward and to make sure that our children, regardless of their zip code, get the best education.
David, your response.
Well, sure. First, we start with very high expectations. I know when I got to the school board in 2006, it was really extraordinary. There was a kind of a continual talk of as soon as the community is ready to send us children who are prepared to learn, we'll educate them. But that's not the hand we're dealt all the time. There's some children who come from real deprivation, real challenges. And Dr. Register has done a very good job over the last 5 or 6 years raising everyone's expectations for all children. We're at the most critical time in Nashville I think we've been in many, many years on the hiring of a superintendent. This organization, the Metro Public Schools, is a very top-down driven system. And if we're able to secure an A+ superintendent who will push authority down to the school level, down to the principals, down to the teachers, I think that's where you get great results. On the charter side, that's a lot of the success we're seeing there comes from the autonomy, the flexibility of the teachers and principals to make decisions. So let's make sure the organization of Metro National Public Schools is actually assisting the process along with high expectations, because I certainly agree with the question that it's not about great edifices in Nashville, it's about building great people and having a very humane approach to all these challenges. My expectations are very high, and we're seeing in the recent years extraordinary performance from low-income children who have many disadvantages, and that's great. That's the proof points we need to have to show all schools, all principals, all teachers, all parents that every child can be educated to a very high level. So that must be the collective responsibility of our community. And I think it's important to say our community. We, the adults, have a compact with our children to say we will provide everybody an excellent education, and we have failed to do so. Well, we're starting to do so. We're do so now more than ever, but if we don't do it now, it's a failure of either political will or intelligence. I know we're smart enough to do it, so I'm optimistic with the right superintendent, we can make a huge difference for some of our most in need children.
Megan, a rebuttal?
I think that hiring that superintendent is a critical hire for Nashvillians. I heard David say in his response that there was a time in Nashville where parents and teachers and community leaders said that somehow we aren't going to educate children until children are ready to learn. I don't remember that time. I know many teachers and principals and parents who have always cared deeply about how we educate our children in Nashville.
I'm joined now by Melissa Holden, and Melissa has a question as well.
It's clear that there's a lack of affordable housing in Nashville, especially in and around downtown. This is especially true for those who either don't want to or can't afford to buy a home. Rental rates in the city have soared, so much so that most working families and young professionals simply can't afford to live in Nashville where they can ply their trade. What specific plans do you have to address the lack of affordable rental housing?
David?
Sure, I don't think anyone in Nashville wants this to become a socioeconomically, non-diverse city. We want all people of all income levels to find a place here. We want our teachers, our nurses, our police officers to live within Davidson County. And increasingly, that's not the case. Fortunately, there's some specific things we can do. As mentioned before, the Barnes Housing Trust, Mayor Dean set that up a few years ago. I would encourage the city to have a conversation about it. And we put some real capital in this. This money can be used levered 3, 4, 5 to 1 with banks, and we can build a pretty significant supply of workforce housing. Beyond that, we can use the zoning code to give incentives to developers. It happens in other states where you say, we'll increase the zoning of a property to permit, to give them inducement to create more affordable housing. Also, HUD and MDHA are working on a project now to both rebuild our low-income homes, but also add workforce housing to it. And finally, let's remember that one component of this is transit. We have some affordable housing scattered around. You mentioned the downtown and the Gulch. We have other areas, but our transit system is really not adequate for people to have access both to the affordable homes and to their place of work. And so, as the current mayor said, everything is connected, and transit is a big part of this situation as well.
Megan?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I hear that a lot. And we have moved the ball, but we need to continue to move that ball. So during my time on Metro Council, we have created partnerships, public and private partnerships, specifically targeted for our creative class. We've built Rolling Mill Hill. We have looked at and created a new kind of zoning called work maker space. That means that you can live in the same place that you work. And that's going to open up more affordable opportunities for folks who are creative. But when you talk about the renters, that's what I hear the most. And renters are the ones who are most critically impacted when things change. And other cities have moved forward with land trusts that are not just for affordable housing to have that workforce set aside, but also for renter set aside. And I want to make sure that we're looking at that. The state just recently did us a favor by letting us now put more dollars into the Barnes Fund by creating more incentives that we can use. And when you talk about incentives, that's key. We just passed on the Metro Council enacting legislation that will now mandate some kind of inclusionary zoning. The Planning Commission now will go away, come back to us with the tools that we need to make this happen. I think it's important to realize that these are issues we've been working on. They didn't just pop up yesterday, that we've actually taken steps over the last several years to see the problems and then try to address the problems. That's what I'm going to continue to do as mayor.
David, 30 seconds.
Sure, and one of the components, we've talked about a few different things about the supply of the houses, but one of the other issues is the price. And one reason the price has gone up is was the tax hike, property tax hike of 13%. Ms. Berry signed on to a few years ago. We have to be fiscally careful here. We're able to spend $18 million on a Gulch bridge. We spend tens of millions of dollars on incentives. But I think, how do we prioritize our money? And I think we've had an ongoing problem for many years on affordable housing. And first thing we need to do is make sure we spend within our means and don't have to force our property taxes up, which exacerbates this issue.